Hello and welcome to episode 3 of The Old Garage. I'm Wild Bill, and we have a couple things to do. First of all, we've got some questions to answer, and of course I've got a contest result to give out. So first let's go to the questions. Alright, let's take a look here. James asked, when was sand casting first used for cars, specifically cylinder heads? Well, the answer is right from the beginning. Sand casting is one of the simplest methods of casting. That and lost wax. You have porcelain casting. I mean, there's various casting methods. Once you get into the, well past the 1900 and into the 1910s, 1920s, then you're going to start seeing more forging as opposed to casting. But cylinder heads, I mean, right from the beginning. Carl Benz did it. Gottlieb Daimler did it. They all did it. That started very early. All right, have another question. This one from Václav Fate. Thanks for the help. Okay, although he says he couldn't think of a real good question. I mean, actually, I think he did. And the question is, how common, how fast, and how dangerous was driving at night before and around the year 1900? I'm not sure if carbide lanterns were a thing yet, so driving on candlelight must have been quite an adventure, I imagine. Well, you were right about carbide lights. They really didn't come around until around 1895-ish. And they never really were used on cars to any extent. They were used on bicycles and, of course, in mines. But for lighting for the actual use of lights on automobiles, before and around 1900, it was either going to be kerosene or naphtha. Naphtha being, another mineral spirit that was used a lot for lighting. And also keep in mind that using these types of lights produced a flame, but it wasn't necessarily easy to deflect and direct. You did have, reflectors on lamps at that time, but really, up to and including 1900 and right around there, not until you get into really electric lighting on cars, which happens later in the first decade of the 20th century, are you going to have lights that are capable of actually lighting the road for you. Prior to that, lights were basically so you could be seen. And also in most countries, you had speed limits that were under 13 miles an hour. So night driving was very uncommon because of that. And it wasn't really until electric lighting where you could really push, a light beam forward and actually see where you're going, did night driving become common. So, great question, frankly. I thought it was. Okay, Spirit Fox MY, yeah, we're getting used to him. I did take a look at your channel, and you seem to do a lot of flight simulators. But anyway, your question is, how did steam cars work? I can't imagine having a stoker to shovel coal into one of those things on a regular basis. Also, you mentioned that petrol cars needed transmissions with multiple gears. Why didn't steam cars require gearing in the way the petrol cars did? All right, that's fair enough. Well, you were right with steam cars needing someone to throw in coal or wood, depending on how they were fired, early on in the 19th century. That was going to be the case all the way through to and including de Dion-Bouton's work. Because, his first steam cars were were wood-fired or coal-fired. But this is kind of where there may be a little bit of convergence between my channel and Truck NFL's, because once the gas-powered car showed up in 1889, this caused a spurious amount of work from the steam companies to make a boiler system that was much easier to use, because that was one of the very first advantages that gas cars had over steam cars, is that you didn't have to stop or get out of your seat or whatever and try to shovel fuel into your boiler. You know, a gas car, you know, it was a liquid system and it was just continuously moving fuel, so you didn't have to go through that process. So it was very early on during this period of the automotive industry's development that the steam car manufacturers developed the fire tube boiler. And that's why I mentioned Drakenfeld, because he talked about oh gosh, just about over a year ago, I think it was. He did a video about boilers on ships, and he mentioned that it was slower than what was happening on land. Well, this is what was happening on land. By the time you get to, you know, the early 1890s, you now have these fire tube boilers that actually can use the same fuel that the gas vehicles do to, you know, take fuel, make a fire, put that fire into a space where you've got water, you know, in these tubes that's just getting boiled real quickly. And more importantly, because it's done with a liquid and tubes, all you have to do is turn a valve to feed your your boiler. You don't have to sit there and shovel, you know. So that was a very major development at the time. Yeah, that's why, you know, you by the time you get to companies like, you know, Stanley and Locomobile and White and Autocar, well, Autocar didn't do too many of them, but you're going to get, there's a list of steam companies that went that direction, but we'll get to that in another episode. Regarding steam cars not needing transmissions, well, that's because of the nature of a steam engine and how it works. Unlike a gasoline engine, a steam engine can produce pretty much all of its power from a state of rest, which is also true of electric motor. So if you have a steam engine and you simply hit the fuel and say go move forward, you have 100% power if you want it right there, even if the engine isn't moving. Well, you have to start a gas engine, and a gas engine moves at a much higher RPM, revolutions per minute, and so it does require a bit of inertial energy, you know, to produce the horsepower that it does. So it has to move quicker. It's not as strong torque-wise as a steam engine is, and that's why. Steam engines just are, I remember, come on, Jay Leno, we all know who he is if you're into classic cars. He calls steam, you know, the hand of God pushing you, you know, because it's just so much power immediately available. You don't need a transmission. Now, that doesn't mean that there were companies that didn't actually, you know, steam carriages that made transmissions. White is a great example of this. They did do that. They didn't have to, but they did, but there'll be episodes about that. So there you go. There's the steam car question. And we're going to move on here. Okay, James MacArthur. He asked two questions. I'm going to address the first one first. He says, I have two questions for you. Okay, first, what development or developments are there that people overlook from this period of car history that you think are critical to the car? Oh, wow. A lot of them I've already talked about, you know, where to put the wheels on a car. Okay, everything had been tried by the time you get to the year 1900. What's the best way to steer a car was another one. Yeah, and I've talked about. Some of the ones that I haven't really mentioned so far was really the influence of the electric starter on the gas powered vehicles, and what a revolution it was. Electric lighting, which I just already alluded to, was one. Here's something that we really take for granted now, but was really pioneered by the early automotive industry, and that is the ability to manufacture a product with interchangeable parts. And no, Ford did not pioneer that. He was involved, but he didn't. He wasn't the first to do it. Really, the first to prove that you could do it was Cadillac. There was back in the day, and I'll talk about it later, what was called the Doers Trophy, for efficiency, etc. And they won it in 1908. Cadillac did. They took 3 of their cars, and they shipped them over to England, completely disassembled all 3 cars, mixed all the parts up, took a whole new set of mechanics and said, okay, here's the blueprints, put the 3 cars back together, not knowing what part went to what. Now, we take that for granted now, that, if you buy a part at AutoZone or Chief or O'Reilly's or wherever, that whatever part you buy is going to fit whatever car you got. But that wasn't the case for a long time. And it was actually Cadillac that won an award for proving that they could take 3 cars, completely disassemble them, down to the wires, the spark plugs, the pistons, the fenders, you name it, everything, and then mix them up, put 3 cars back together, and first time all 3 cars started and were fine because their parts were that interchangeable. And that's a massive industrializing principle that really was given birth, or not really given birth, but given its refinement through the birth of the automotive industry. So that's a huge one that I would definitely hit. Okay, his second question says, what question would you have asked yourself from this period in car history that has not yet to be asked? Please ask it and then answer it. Oh boy. Okay. All right. Guilty. This is guilty pleasure moment, and if there's one question that I wish would have really been answered, or asked of me, it's this one, because I'm into kind of like lists, top 10 this, top 5 this, top 20 this, top 15. I like those kind of YouTube channels too. And I know I've asked Drock a few top 10, top 5 things. I was waiting for someone to ask me the top 5 worst cars of the vintage era. And I'm going to clarify that because, frankly, the top 5 worst cars of the vintage era are at the same time the top 5 worst cars of all time. Now, this is my opinion, but I'm right. And the reason I'm right is because it was during this era that cars hadn't really been figured out, so all kind of stupidity was being done. Whereas once you get past 1932, 35, into there, there was stupid stuff being done, but not nearly as stupid as what was being done back in the early days. So that would be the question I would ask. It would be, what were the top 5 worst cars of all time? Now, here's the criteria that I have for my top 5 worst. Number 1, it has to be a car that is just, why did you build this thing? Number 2, then you have to promote it as if it was just far greater than it actually was. It had to totally underperform and be useless at many levels. And so here is my number 5 is going to be the Holtzman, which was manufactured in the United States back in the first decade of the 20th century. This is a company that claimed to be the oldest, best, most prestigious manufacturer of cars that there was, and that's how they advertised themselves. It was obviously false. This thing was nothing more than a dog cart with an engine bolted on it. It was junk when it was new. It's junk now. It was just wrong. Okay, so there's my number 5. Number 4 worst, also from the United States, is going to be the Mets. Now, here's why I give this one the number 4. It was because Mets, was looking at what Henry Ford was doing, and Mets was in, at the same time, right around, 1910, 1914, right around there. But what he did was decided that some people wanted to buy a car but didn't have all the money, and so he would go ahead and let you buy a car on installments, okay? But rather than getting a bank loan, he literally sold you chunks of the car on installments. You could buy 14 total chunks of this thing, and once you finally bought all 14, if you were a garage mechanic and liked to tinker, you could put yourself together a car. But here's the problem. This guy Metz actually started selling his first couple of installment pieces of the car before he had actually designed the whole thing. And so what would happen is, as he finally was having to rush and design the rest of the car because he was getting people that had bought his installments and were saying, hey, I want to buy more, they didn't fit. They didn't work. It was a fiasco. You would end up having to, modify your own factory vehicle because it hadn't been thought out before he started. Metz really screwed the pooch on that one. It was just. What the heck are you thinking? He did eventually produce a completed car, but by that time the damage was done, and he was basically being sold out of a catalog. I mean, no. Number 4 for me is the Mets. Number 3, worst car of all time. We're going to England, and that's going to be the Trojan. If you've never heard of this thing, it was first designed and conceived in 1913, and it had solid tires on it. Yeah, in 1913. By that time, come on, you know how to put tires in a car. But no. But it solved this by having cantilever wonder springs, as a suspension. It had a extraordinarily primitive engine in it. That was extremely underbuilt to the point where the cranks, the piston rods would actually flex while the thing ran. I mean, it was just stupid. And back in, they didn't go into production of the car in any seriousness until the very early 1920s. But if you were in England back in the 1920s and you went past a garage, that repaired cars, you would see signs that said, no Trojans. They wouldn't even look at these things. It was a disposable car the way that a plastic water bottle is disposable today. This thing was junk from brand new. And it was behind its time and never caught up. It was a joke. But it's not the worst. Still got 2 more. Number 2 in my list of worst cars of all time has got to be the Sunbeam Mabley. Oh my word. We're talking like 1900, right? 1899? But either way, it doesn't matter. This is the car that really tried to take a modular sofa, put 4 wheels on it in a star pattern, have the engine drive the center wheels, a single steering tiller drive both front and rear wheels. It was absurd. You can't, you got a handle tiller, you got the wheels in the front and the back, and they're not even in the same alignment. I mean, the front wheel's offset from the back one by almost a foot. What were you thinking? This is not a car. This is a drunk sofa. You can't, trying to actually maneuver this would be like trying to maneuver the USS Monitor down the Potomac. It just was bam, 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 bam. It's dumb. Yeah. Bad car. But not the worst. The worst car, drum roll please, the worst car ever produced by humanity is the Pennington. Oh my God. Oh yeah, Mr. Pennington is going to get an episode just for being probably the worst charlatan, con artist, dupester, fraud ever in automotive history. Yeah, Pennington is that good a guy, American guy, but then he went over and infected Great Britain when he got to Harry Lawson. Now look at this car. According to Pennington, this thing will seat 9 people. Now let me ask you a question. Where will you put them? This thing did not even have a carburetor. The way you got gas into the cylinder was to drip it into a hole in the head of it. No, it's. Are you kidding me? They tried to run this thing at the Brighton, London run. It only got 1.5 miles and it already fouled dozens and dozens of spark plugs before the driver just walked away and said, "To hell with it." I mean, it was, this thing is just wrong. And it absolutely is the worst car ever manufactured by humanity. And why a human being would have made this thing is beyond me. Okay, rant over. So we also have a contest going on right now, and so let's take a look at what was actually submitted. And here's what we've got. Let's see, Stance the Menace. Before 1933, you say. How about 1932 Duesenberg Model Sj? It's got the iconic look. It's luxurious. It's blazing fast. Oh yeah. 32 Doozy. I mean, now all Duesenbergs from 1929 onwards were built in 29. They were just rebought. They were just bought in the year and then, you know, designated that year. But it was in 1932 that they first offered the supercharger, which made the 270 horsepower engine that they had, the straight 8 Lycoming, into a 330 horsepower and even in some modifications up to 400 horsepower. Oh yeah. I've had one of these pictured. It's the wallpaper on my studio computer for over 10 years. Yeah, love that car. Woo! Now, Roger Bilbo. He went with Rolls-Royce Phantom, the junkyard coupe from the mid-1920s. Why? Round doors and overall just a stunning look. I'm sorry, buddy, but we had a vote. I have to disqualify that one. And the reason is simple. Yes, it was built on a 1925 Phantom 1 chassis. Yes, that's true. However, that body was put on in 1935. And you kind of noticed I may have hinted at that in the comments because I said he would have picked a Voisin because that's, or Voisin, or however the hell you say it. But that car is actually a 35 on a 25 chassis. So I'm sorry I had to disqualify it, but you're right, it's freaking awesome. Okay. Robin McFarlane, the Austin 7. Well, why? Well, even an idiot like me could drive it. It was reliable, relatively, very economical, and an ideal car for the modern world. Yeah, 1923, the Austin 7 came out. Yeah, it had the common layout that we know. I mean, the Model T, I mean, you didn't drive it the same way that you drive a modern car. It wasn't shifted the same way. That was different. It wasn't handled in the same fashion. Whereas the Austin 7 really was just, you know, your 3 on the floor, okay, and your standard 3 pedals. It was very groundbreaking. It's been called the Model T of Europe, but I don't think that's fair because the Model T was not nearly as advanced as the Austin 7. I mean, it lasted up until the 1940s. You know, as a viable vehicle. BMW's first car was basically a licensed Austin 7. You know, it was very influential. You know, a lot of us American guys don't think about, what were the equivalents in Europe, but, how the development was in Europe. And the car development in Europe was different. Austin 7 definitely played a big part, so good choice. Oh God, Sretko Krivalo, help. He says, Graft and Stift luxury limousines, a double Phaeton, good enough to start a world war. Oh yeah, Austria. Graft and Stift, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful car. At that time, they were just as prestigious as Minerva, Rolls-Royce, Horst, any of the big players, Packard, if you even want to consider them in Graft and Stift's position. Beautiful vehicles. Okay. Now, Václav Fate, he voted for the 1926 Bentley 6.5 liter with a solid roof. And why? Because this was driven and loved by the Demon Crowley and Terry Pratchett's and Neil Gaiman's book, Good Omens. Well, I do know the 26 Bentley 6.5. Oh, that thing's a beast. World's fastest trucks. Beautiful car. I know Jay Leno's got one. I know he's got an episode on that particular car, so you check it out. Now, Daniel Silverthorne, he went with the 1914 Pierce Arrow Model 66 with a touring body. If you can get a body by LeBaron, I mean, that would have been the great. Highest car built in the U.S. at the time. Yeah, Pierce Arrow, beautiful car. By your headlights you shall know them. Yes. And the Model 66, largest car, passenger vehicle ever built in the United States was the Model 66 Pierce Arrow. These things were so huge, and with the hugest, biggest, monstrous engine, that many of them were converted into fire trucks. I mean, these things were massive, but at the same time, they were torquey things, and they were stump pullers, and their engine could just get them moving, even though these things weighed 3+ tons. But beautiful car, absolutely right. We'll have to do a special on that one at some point. All right. Now, Nico de Firolosher says, I would buy the 1932 Helicon Propeller Car. Why? Because it's wild, exotic, weird, and loud. Yeah. I think don't they have that at the Peterson Museum right now? I think they do. But yeah, that thing is nuts. Yeah, it fits. It's definitely out there. That'd be cool to have. Now, Gabriel F., he entered the contest. He's already got his ego full, and he said that he already seen some of the stuff. But he said the obvious choice is the Doble Series E. I'm not too picky about the year. Let's just say 1924. So all right. Okay, I love the Roadster body style with its rumble seats, even if it's still a big, heavy car. And he says more about it, but yeah, Doble. Doble was Abner Doble perfected the steam car with the Series E in 1924, although he didn't think he did, and so he never really, I think he only built 48 of them. Howard Hughes bought a couple of them. I know Jay Leno has one of Howard Hughes's that has the rumble seat, as well as another one. And there's some in New Zealand. There's still some more still existing in the U.S. But this guy, he built a steam car that you could just turn the key and go. The problem was the thing was $25,000. But beautiful car. We'll definitely be talking about them. All right, then we have James. He went with a 1916 Mack Model AC with a 1916's home wrecker #1. Reason is, while the Mack was reliable, most others not so such. Then he could build a towing empire. Okay. So you could go ahead and tow all of the cars that were on this list that broke down. All right, I'm game for that. Yeah, Mack. As I mentioned, I think. Another previous the old garage. started off with buses, but then they went to trucks, and they just got the legend for being reliable. You know, built like a Mack truck, you know, meant something. So definitely see where you're coming from there. All right, and then we have Kent Feverly. He went, mine would be a 1929 Bentley 4 Thruppen Mabley Tourer, Elegance and Power. Yeah. Okay, so this is the kind of guy who's a guy who's gonna buy one of these cars brand new is the kind of guy that hunted and had a wine cellar. So I think I know where you're coming from. I mean, the car was all about sophistication. So yeah, I feel it. And finally, we have what farkin' hell. Okay. Now he said that his favorite car from that period of time would be the Model T Ford. And because it was a huge nod to the horse-drawn buggies and lower body work, with the upper body work being huge, a nod to the already dead stagecoach that had been wiped out by rail. And he goes on, you can check it out. Yeah, the Model T was definitely influential. You have to remember that back in that time, roads in the United States weren't exactly good things. And so we'll see that in the next episode coming up this Saturday. And the undercarriage of the Model T reflected that, so that it could actually maneuver in the United States. And also the upper carriage of the car, the body of the car, was also influential. It had the whole right side, the left-hand steering that we do, not the right-hand steering. So that had an issue too. But we'll get into that later. But yeah, excellent choice. So here's what happens: is that I think I have all in all some excellent entries, and so I decided to do this through a very scientific method of determining who is going to be the winner. And so I used basically the lovable mama method. Allow me to introduce to you Pat, also known as Lovable Mama. Hi, Mama. Okay, so what we're going to do, written on all of these here, are the various cars that were in the contest. And I'm going to place them now into this little hat here. Now, Mama, your mission, I'm going to mix them up. Your mission is to pick one. Okay? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. And
Is that one?
now you got a few of them there, just one.
I'll mix them up again.
Okay. Get a good mix on there.
Is that one?
That's one.
Okay.
Let's see what it is.
1924
Doble.
Double.
Model E, or Series E, 1924 Doble. Didn't Mama do a great job? Let's give her a round of applause. Yay! And that is the scientific Lovable Mama method. Okay, I don't want anybody shouting, rigged, rigged, rigged. Okay, no, that didn't happen. That really is what she picked, was the choice of Gabriel F. So, Gabriel F., you can contact me through the channel. You have got your pick, pre-1914, pre-World War I. What's going to be the topic? I will put together the episode and we will get her done. So, congratulations, round of applause. And we'll see you next time on Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. Peace.